Welcome to Postwave. You're here with Eric and Trevor. So today we're going to be asking a question that has been around for a long time and would seem to have an obvious answer to a lot of people, but we both think it's worth talking about in a pretty rigorous way. We're talking about why art matters, why do art in 2020 in America, and how we can justify that when there's so much suffering and awful shit going on in the world.
So, Trevor, should there be art?
It's a good question. Do you think do you think we should like introduce ourselves because it's the first episode, and also I feel like it's kind of relevant to this question, like our background.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. That sounds like an excellent idea. So, Trevor, who are you?
Yeah. So, I guess I'll just say, so both Eric and I went to CU Boulder for music composition and graduated in 2017, right? Yeah.
Correct.
So we've been out of school for about 3 years, out in the real world. And I've been here in Austin, Texas, and pretty much right after I got back, I started working at Ballet Austin as a pianist, like 18 hours a week, and did that for about 2 years, and was teaching too, and started gigging a lot, especially after like a year and a half out of school, and kind of around, I guess like 6 months ago or something, started to just like question everything and have kind of like a quarter life crisis. And I had been on like the music path at that point for like, I don't know, 16 years, some stupid amount of time. And that was like the only thing that, not the only thing, it was like the main thing that like defined me. It was like my identity was basically like tied up in it. And
absolutely.
When I started to kind of question why I was doing it and what it was bringing to the world, everything just kind of started to crumble, and I started to rethink everything, and I'm still kind of there. Yeah, I think that kind of gets us up to date. How about you?
Wow. Yeah, that's really thoughtful, and I feel like I should have anticipated this question and thought a little bit about it. Who the hell am I? I'm Eric Mulhern. I went to school with Trevor at CU Boulder, also for composition, and with a business minor and certificate of entrepreneurship in music. And over the course of that time at college, I had some experiences and a sort of rapid shift in my understanding of the universe that I went into depth of exploring and have continued to do so. I think I am currently living on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts with my lovely grandmother, and just teaching music part-time. So yeah, as Trevor said, we went to school together from the not only the very first day, but actually from the admissions several months before the first day, I believe we met. And quickly hit it off when school started again, or again for the first time.
So maybe I can say a little bit about how I started thinking about this stuff, because I feel like it was very tied up in playing for ballet classes, at least at first.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to remember what it was like even starting, because it's such a like specific idiosyncratic world that like it's hard to even remember what I thought it was going to be before I started doing it. But obviously like it's a amazing art, and it's really hard, and you have to train, really hard for it your entire life and be super committed, and it's beautiful. And but like in the classes, like it's all these little like minutia about your toe is supposed to be half an inch this way and not half an inch the other way. And you spend like so much time, working on those little things. And it's the same thing with music, right? Like you spend hours and hours in rehearsal, like refining tuning and, and balance and phrasing and, all the little minutia. And it's like, that's what you're spending your time on, hours and hours of your days, on these little minutia that, it's certainly true. Like when you hear a performance as like a lay listener, I'm sure, you can tell if people are messing up, or you can tell if, little details are off, but it's like no one of those details on its own is like essential, if that makes sense. I don't know. And like,
Certainly.
I think about an analogy to like an engineer, right, who has to worry about all these little like, esoteric little things that no one is going to care about as long as the building keeps standing. Yeah. So that's the kind of the comparison I go to in my head. Although I don't know if it's fair, but it's something about like you can cultivate an appreciation for these little like minute things, and I can, once it's pointed out to you, you can say, oh, that does look better if their foot is, half an inch this way, or oh, that does sound better if if it's 15 cents sharper or something.
Okay, so here's an interesting question then. I think this will tie into our discussion on the purpose of art, if art has a place in our society, and if so, how. So, do you think that engineering, a field where the study of the minutia is absolutely important, do you think that that skill set, that mindset, could have developed in a society that did not value those that the mindset of attention to detail first in art?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can say like we learned how to have attention to detail in art first, and then we applied it to engineering. Because I mean, like making a bow and arrow, that takes attention to detail, and like, I imagine they probably grew up in or developed in parallel, just as humans developed. Like we've developed more detail in our art and more detail in our manipulation of physical stuff. Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's possible, and it's possible that I mean, something I do think is beautiful about appreciating details is like, you literally have a new experience of something if you're more aware of the little details, right? It's like Terrence McKenna talked about with the forest and like the different colors of green. Like,
absolutely.
yeah, once it's pointed out to you, you're like, oh, it is different, and I can appreciate it. But the problem is like, sorry, this is maybe going a little bit away from your question, but like, it's hard to reach people until you reach them, if that makes sense. Like people won't appreciate the little things unless you have some kind of way to like get out in front of the art and like explain what they all are. And that's not to say people can't have like a meaningful experience without that. It's just there's like another world there that most people don't try to like get to.
Sure. So the passive consumption of art versus an intentioned engagement with art, is that sort of what you're positing? That most audiences probably wouldn't necessarily go the extra mile to appreciate the finer details without having the opportunity for the creator to come and explain those details?
I don't know if it's necessarily the creator themselves, but like, just knowing anything
Or
about
someone.
music as far as like how it's put together and like, I mean, like, just appreciating how like from like an audiophile perspective, like how good the recording sounds, like how good the mixing is, how like how
Sure.
pristine it is, like how, I don't know, this is something that probably people who are involved in new music probably think about more, but like I love when I hear even like a pop song, it's like, wow, I've never literally heard anything like that. Like exactly like that. Even if it's just like one little sound that's like,
Sure. Well, so I ask because that is an idea that has been put forth by David Foster Wallace in his writing of Infinite Jest, which, as you know, is a very large, difficult, and pretty unapproachable book. It's something like 1,100, 1,200 pages long, with several hundred pages of endnotes at the back, where the whole time through you have to flip back and forth.
You haven't read it though, right?
Oh, I have. Okay. Anyway, so in writing this book, he sort of had the hypothesis that maybe, he at least he was sort of attempting to challenge the assumption that people are passive consumers of art, and certainly we can be, but I heard in an interview he was speaking about how he believed that if there was art that people could engage with and that challenged them to engage with, that people would step up and meet it. And I think to a certain extent that has been verified, although not with all audiences.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some like subset of the population who's into that stuff. I don't know. My brain is just going to like, how do you possibly quantify any of this, and like, does it even make sense, or is it even like?
So the tangibility of the rewards of your actions from doing art versus doing other activities that might have more concrete positive outcomes. So here's a question: should there be art at all?
Oh, I think there definitely should. I mean, basically, if I was going to adopt like a radical, like intentionally over radical philosophy, like no gigantic media industry, just like everyone in their own cities, like making their own art for each other. Like, I think that's like the idea.
That would be nice.
That would be nice. I mean, but then like, it's like you wouldn't get to experience like, anyone outside of your
yeah, there's certainly value to be gained by being exposed to art that comes from outside your own community.
Yeah, I mean, I think my stance is just like more amateur bad art and less expensive, like lavish, like.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah. Can you tell me why?
Because I think that's ultimately more satisfying. I think the first person to make me think about that was Kurt Vonnegut, and he has this. Kurt Vonnegut wrote Slaughterhouse-Five and Cat's Cradle and a bunch of other books. Pretty quintessential American author. He said that if you write a poem or draw a picture and tear it up and don't show it to anyone, you've still gained something and have grown by that experience. And I think that's a very valuable way of thinking about things, especially as we move into a world where it's possible more and more art will be created by AI, that a lot of the value of art is what it does for the creator rather than what it does for other people.
That's beautiful.
And I think a lot of people assume that because they can't create art that lives up to the standards of, pop stars and composers who have made millions of dollars and touched millions of lives, that somehow the art they create has no value, or that it's not really helping anyone, or that it's just kind of pathetic or something. But I think more and more we need to help people realize that the value of art is as much for the creator as it is for the person experiencing it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. To me, creating helps organize my mind and lends just a great amount of clarity to my life in general.
yeah, it can get the gears working in a way that's pretty unique
Hmm.
compared to, just kind of sitting there and thinking about your problems and how to solve them and stressing about stuff.
Yeah, that I mean,
Yeah.
well, just about anything's more productive than that. But
I mean, but you need to in some sense, think about issues that you have and how you're going to solve them.
sure.
But art can kind of, if you're like the Roomba robot that's like stuck in a corner and just like, like ramming yourself against the wall, then it can kind of yeah, lead your brain down different paths.
Yeah, absolutely true.
It can like show you things about yourself that you didn't know, or show you even tastes that you have that you wouldn't have discovered otherwise, because you came to those new experiences through some kind of personal exploration.
Mm. My cousin was telling me about how her friend would used to get high all the time and do nothing, and then at some point he picked up the guitar and started playing guitar, and now she says he'll just go home and before he would just go home and get high, and now he'll go home and get high and play the guitar.
Yeah.
But somehow that's like a world of difference.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, actually, I have another question that might. I've got a sort of network of
Yeah.
questions that I want to tie in the best way. Okay, so so Trevor, um, if you can think of what's the art capital of the United States and possibly the world currently?
I mean, New York or LA.
New York
Yeah, New
City,
York,
right?
LA.
Sure. Yeah, LA for film, New York for everything else, right?
I mean, I guess so. I don't.
Oversimplifying, but um, so this may be a controversial perspective, but when I think of New York, I think of the most sad and desolate place that I've ever been.
Yeah.
It's all concrete. It's all noise and alienation and really just a lot of smog.
Yeah.
Bad air. It's a shitty place.
Yeah.
Um, it's all of the natural beauty that exists in the world has been more or less eradicated from this whole swath of the earth. Um, and we've basically taken everything that's naturally beautiful in the world in that place and scrubbed it all out. I know a lot of people might disagree with this assessment, but take it with a grain of salt if you can.
I mean, all cities are kind of like that, but yeah.
All cities, yeah, absolutely. And New York is the city of cities,
Yeah.
right? So, New York is good at fine art, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a refined taste there. I was reading in a book that my grandmother has sitting around from the 60s that talks about the origin of words, and I was reading about the word corny, corny coming from theater performers going out and in the more rural areas there's no appreciation for the finer points of their art, and the only thing that would get a reaction was the more gaudy and on the nose sort of obvious. And so and there's a quote, and I'm not going to be able to say who this was by, but saying that basically anyone outside of New York City is a bumpkin who cannot appreciate fine art.
Okay, so first of all, part of what ties into this is obviously we both went to school for composition and got into a bunch of weird shit in school that we weren't into before. I mean, I feel like it's hard to remember what it was like before, and it like permanently changes your like relationship to music. Um, and part of my crisis was, well, now this kind of music is like my favorite thing, along with like kind of like more experimental like pop, music and hip hop and rock and stuff. And it's like this is like now I'm all of a sudden in this whole other field of things that is very like has a very niche audience, and like I'm super into it. Um, but um, and so like uh well, you were talking about New York, and that was making me think, like, you're in like an urban environment, like it's really austere and cement. And yeah, I think there's great value in art that like makes people feel comforted and like they're, more connected and like, without too much, digging involved for that. Um, so I don't know. That's part of my thinking too. Is just like, um, because then like do you have a ethical obligation to make art that is gonna benefit a wider group of people? That doesn't seem right either.
No.
But at the same time, like if you think about the impact that your life is gonna have, you could have it on this, even with music, just a wider swath of people, um, or not, and then if you choose the niche audience, you're probably having a bigger impact on on the few people you have an impact on. So I mean,
yeah.
just the question of what the value of that.
So this is actually a really interesting point that I'd like to talk about. Okay, I guess the broader question we're asking at this moment is, should there be weird art? Should there be niche art that only serves a smaller audience?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I think the answer has to be yes, and let me tell you why. It has to do with the way that art develops. Art is not linear. It's not like the most studious, the most brilliant person who has the best education is going to come up with the next thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Or to come up with something that will be valuable to its audiences. Art sort of follows a form of natural selection where a lot of people make a wide variety of things, and there's no saying what is going to be well adapted for its environment.
Totally.
And to be well adapted means that it's going to influence people.
Right.
So, for example, take blues. The blues. You had a belittled class of people, African Americans. So in the society when it was being developed, in a classist, racist society, it was considered a lesser status, and so there's very poor individuals sitting around with their detuned guitars, fiddling around with the micro tunings and coming up with this really beautiful, meaningful style that impacted basically all of modern music.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about with like amateur music making. You don't need like $1 million grants and like fancy facilities and like all that shit to innovate. Like that's the other thing. Like the cost today of innovating is like pretty fucking cheap. Like, I mean, like compared to like even 20, 30 years ago. And when I say innovate, I don't mean like groundbreaking, inventing like new kinds of like instruments or any. I mean, you could do that too, but yeah, it's like we have access to so much more, and like everyone has access to that shit. Like basically,
Absolutely. Well, couldn't you say that the value in the art that you're creating is almost certainly going to happen in the individual cases where the creator is being honest to their own interests and exploring what they believe is valuable?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like entrance fee for like good art.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So circling back to New
Yeah.
York, I guess I was saying that it's a pretty bleak place where we've eradicated all of the natural beauty, more or less, and art flourishes here, um, and I think a large part of that is to fill a void that exists, but if you look at art that people can make, it's pretty limited in its scope, in its grandeur, in its interest level of intricacy, um, and really, one could take the view that art is a pale facsimile of what beauty the natural world can create.
Yeah. I mean,
Actually, sorry. Right, but hold that thought. I'm gonna run and grab the book I was reading because there's a beautiful quote
okay.
that relates to this. But I do want to hear
Do
your
it.
thought. This is from River of Stars by Guy Gavriel Kay. Master Z's last essay was about art and nature. It proposed that the blossoming of the plum in early spring was so delicately beautiful, so evocative of fragility, as to render words about it or paintings of it crude, inadequate, however skilled the artist or poet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, yeah. I mean, you can't actually capture the essence of everything completely. Um, but I think, like, I mean, if you sound in particular, like, if you think about the most complicated sounds you would hear in nature, like bird call, you know, um, I mean, any sound an animal makes is going to be like the most complicated thing you're going to hear, right? I mean, besides like a waterfall or like an avalanche or, you know,
Hmm.
or thunder. But as far as like organized, like obviously there is some being like putting its, will into creating sound. Like it's pretty darn limited. And it's kind of interesting if you think about it, because like visually, I totally get your point. Like like a lot of things we can't hold a
Hmm.
candle to, but like yeah, with sound, it's just it feels like it's such a big fucking leap.
Wow, that's fascinating. Um, yeah. Wow. Oh,
I mean, I
okay.
guess so.
Cool.
Like, yeah, I mean, you can't actually like standing next to a gigantic waterfall. I mean, you can maybe simulate that if you're in like a movie theater or something, or like with an orchestra, but it's still not the same thing. I don't know. Yeah.
Certainly. Um, yeah. Um, okay. And I'd love to continue. This is another. Um, actually, nah. Screw that. Yeah. Let's keep talking about this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like what other
uh,
forms of art could you even draw an analogy to? Like, there's nothing in nature like theater or like
Poetry.
poetry. I mean, we actually don't know
uh,
that. I mean, animals could be speaking poetry to each other, and we wouldn't know.
yeah. Um, yeah. It makes me think of that Terrence McKenna quote that you sent me of
Oh
glossolalia
yeah,
and about how people communicate. He postulates that how people communicated before there was language was really as if people were talking, but without particular meaning to the words, and that communicated something valuable.
yeah, yeah, man, yeah. It's really fascinating to think about like how language started and like what happened before that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, certainly. So we can't necessarily compare art to nature, um, except in the form of it. But what about in the its ability to inspire people, to impart a sense of awe into the person engaging with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely valuable because I mean, everyone needs that, you know,
Absolutely.
At certain points. Um, but then it's just like it's just a means to like providing that. I mean, I guess that's not a bad thing in itself, but it's like you as the artist, your only function is to enable this person to have this moment of awe so that they continue living their life and doing the stuff that they do to make the world a better place.
I mean, that sounds honestly valuable to me.
Yeah.
Think of all the instances where someone might become dejected and give up when they're creating a lot of value in the world, but then they engage with something that gives them awe, and it inspires them to continue. Like, isn't that what life is all about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is getting dangerously close to you could save someone's life, which I feel like is an argument that gets thrown around a lot during these kinds of conversations. And it's such like
Sure.
I mean, it can definitely happen, but like, the odds of it happening, you know, are so low that it doesn't really make sense for that to be your motivation. I mean, like, I definitely agree it can like unstick people, or keep them going. But it's, yeah. I mean, when was the last time you had an experience like that?
Like of awe?
Yeah.
I couldn't put a. Okay, I might be able to. Yeah, I would say last year.
Yeah.
When I experienced the art of a local singer songwriter in my community, really inspired me, and to sorry, I'm just trying to because it's that girl I got a huge ass crush on. But it's totally about her art too. I mean, that inspired me to begin writing again when I had been not writing for a long time, and not just to create my own art, but to kind of engage with my life at the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to remember when the last time was for me. I mean, I feel like if it's, I mean, the times I'm trying to remember is like when I heard a recording of something and I was like, wow, how did I not know about this? This is like, this is like exactly what I'm into. And
yeah, but so nature kind of has a similar ability to inspire awe and to inspire people. And I don't know if you can compare like quantity, like to what degree does nature inspire and to what degree does art inspire, but I think you can say that nature accomplishes things effortlessly, far beyond the scope of what art can accomplish. I mean, just like, and this is something hard to understand if you're living in an environment that's separate from nature. It's one of the great privileges I feel from living in a rural area right now, where I'm in a place that I can go outside and be in nature, and just like even just like looking at a small patch of brush, and in that brush maybe there's some ivy, and to see that leaf, the same leaf shape repeated over and over again, it speaks to something deep. It's life.
Beautiful.
That's what it is. It's beautiful, exactly.
Yeah. Totally.
And I think art can do that, but it's constrained, I think, in its scope. Now this is actually, I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit, because I don't necessarily believe what I just said.
About what?
About art being limited, but I think if you do regard art as something that is separate from nature, that it is inherently not as powerful as nature is.
Yeah, everything's a part of nature, right? So
Of course, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, if you regard it as a part of nature, then no matter how bad the art is, it's just like another leaf, right? It's just like another leaf of ivy along the vine, and that's beautiful.
Yeah. No, I like it. Do you have anything more on that? I have another kind of place to go.
Sure, go on.
Okay, so like we're making all these very high, kind of intellectual arguments about stuff, and part of my worry has been like, I have all these arguments too, but what if we're just deceiving ourselves because one, we're too privileged to actually know like or see the gap in life experience between us and, the majority of the people in the world who are, living in developing countries and stuff. Um and yeah, that kind of in my brain that's kind of like the trump card, and it's like I is it all just like motivated reasoning and like post hoc rationalization because we're all, most people who are thinking these thoughts are already, down the path to a career in the arts, and to change course or, to go back and do something different is like such a, it takes a lot of energy to, change course. And, and so I started to wonder if like I was, you know, thinking all these thoughts because I didn't want to change course, and because I was, and again, because my position doesn't really allow me to actually witness the full extent of the inequality that I'm worried about, if that makes sense. And it's like,
Absolutely.
and it's like, is everyone, that I went to school with and that I see at these festivals, is everyone just like deceiving themselves, and we're all so wrapped up in our, our life in the US that we
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that actually hits home really hard. I've had the same sensation. Not long ago. I remember waking up in the morning, and sometimes in the morning you just have this clarity, and I saw that my motivation for getting into music in the first place, back in high school, was the thing that I was good at, so that's how I valued myself in the eyes of my peers. And not inconsequentially, that's how I valued myself in the eyes of capitalist society. That is to say, that was my talent. That was the thing I had invested time into, and was good at, and so that's what I could make money with.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I had the same kind of, this is what I'm good at, this is what people know me for, stuff going on. But I remember like the most concrete thought I had was like, I don't know what my potential is, and it's possible it could be pretty big. No one knows. So like, I don't want to take the chance. I don't want to miss the chance,
Interesting. So for me though, I had that realization, and it did come with it was a flooring thought, and it came with the okay, so what am I gonna do with my life now? Am I gonna continue doing music that I got into for all of the wrong reasons, or am I going to do something else? And for me, for me, what we have been talking about, I mean, they are merited ideas. Sure. There is value to these thoughts, and I think on a lot of them we're right. Even if they're not the reasons that I got into it in the first place. But I find myself now down the path, in this position where I have this opportunity. I have a skill set where I can inspire people. I can inspire my students. I can inspire people who appreciate my art. And I kind of want to. I kind of want to share this with other people.
Yeah. But again, how do we know these things actually have value and it's not just
Okay, and that's a difficult thing because I think that the tangibility of the value you create in creating art is so hard to pin down. You can never know what art might affect people and how it might affect people.
Right.
But I think, as you said before, like, should there be any art at all? Well, yeah, there probably should, right?
Well,
and so because art evolves through natural selection, to engage in creating art, even if the art does not end up inspiring people, as long as you are honest with your intentions, you are forwarding the agenda of art, which is to forward itself.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. Yeah, I mean part of this whole thing too is like, I mean, I was at the same time I was doubting everything, I was realizing like how much work it actually is, to like do to it's like it's not an easy job, and like someone, I'm glad there are people doing it. It's just my suspicion is that there are a lot of people like me out there who could be doing something else and might be happier doing something else and still be able to do their art and be satisfied with that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean there are definitely those people. It's just no one knows who they are until
Yeah, until you have that moment of honesty with yourself. Yeah, I think that's absolutely valid. I think that, at least with my own experience of going through music school and engaging with my peers to the extent that I did, a lot of those fuckers had no idea why they were there. It was just like me. They were on autopilot. They were doing what made them feel like someone in high school.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe they were in the band and they felt pretty cool being in the band, and everywhere else they were a dork, and or else they would have felt like a dork except for that they had band, and so then after they graduate, they applied to music school and just kept that going.
That's funny. I feel like I didn't really feel that way about people at CU, but it's interesting.
I may have been more judgmental and stuck up my ass.
It's possible.
I may still be. Let's go back, because I have another thing I wanted to talk about New York City, and my sort of cynical view of the city and of art, which is that why else is art flourishing there in particular? And I want to quote, nerd that I am, I want to quote Patrick Rothfuss, Name of the Wind. Art needs one thing to flourish: an appreciative, affluent audience.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, why is there so much art in New York? Because of the high concentration of rich people.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense historically, because wouldn't you say that a lot of the culture of fine art has arisen from a very classist society where you have rich people showing off to each other about how rich they are,
right,
and about how much free time they have, or just idle rich people who don't know what to do with their time. And I think a lot of elitism stems from that. A lot of, oh, well, you can't appreciate the finer arts, the finer points of my art because you're just a country bumpkin. You're just a poor person. You can't understand.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I'm there with you on that.
And I do believe that elitism lives on to this day, not only in New York but also in academia.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like I was talking about with like the ballet thing and like details that you can't really appreciate until they're pointed out to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and being and
Yeah.
being like in the know about like
Mm-hmm.
uh
And doesn't it just seem to you that that's the wrong reason to be doing the art?
uh yeah. I mean the superiority thing is the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm. Because yeah, if you're getting into art to show off to yourself how much better you are than everyone else, that's not a genuine interaction with art. That's just egoism.
Yeah, I mean then you're getting into like analyzing people who like those kinds of rich people about whether they actually enjoy things or if they're just like faking it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean
And maybe you
they're
can't really say conclusively about any individual other than
right.
yourself. But you can kind of notice trends, and you can say, yeah, maybe a lot of the people who are going into music school today are maybe people who are going in for the wrong reasons because they haven't had that honesty
Mm-hmm.
to address it with
Yeah,
themselves.
I guess like if I think about what I wish I heard when I was going to school, it's like, and this is part of what I've been thinking about a lot is like when you're going into school, people like I don't know about you, and for me it was like, oh, he's obviously going into music, so like, you know, um, but no one was really like, yeah, I understand you're really excited about music, but think about the impact you want to have on the world as like a human being, and you're gonna work, like 80,000 hours towards some cause, and basically like told me all the things I've heard within the past year and a
Mm.
half, because I just feel like people. The impression I got from people was like it's like a silly question to figure, to like put the weight of the world on your shoulders and ask very honestly how you can actually help the most. Um,
Mm.
and that's kind of an impossible task, or like there's no way to quantify that, or obviously you have to
Mm.
balance that with doing something you love because you're not going to be good at it unless you enjoy it. Um, but
Sure, but I think we've already agreed that there's an a definite value to creating art. However, that the value is often very intangible, and it's hard to point out exactly how it's going to affect people,
mm-hmm,
or what impact it's going to have on the
mm-hmm,
world. Um, but I think we both agree that it's at the end of the day, like you said, there should be art. There should be people making art.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's absolutely valid that uh, it, maybe people before getting into it should ask themselves that question and say, "It is that like." Because if you're addressing the question, then maybe you have an honest engagement with the art, an honest
Yeah,
intentionality.
yeah, totally. And I mean, yeah, there are totally people out there who are just like, I suck at everything else except for music, which I'm like amazing at. It's like, it's like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, those people, like, they're obviously some of the ones who should be doing it. um, it's weird that the end of high school was like 7 years ago for us.
Jesus,
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
time flies.
I was 17 when I was making all these decisions because I didn't turn 18 until September of freshman year.
Oh, because you're super fucking smart.
No, I have a late birthday.
Ah, okay. So, if fine art has an elitism about it, what is the value of folk art versus fine art?
Oh, I mean, I would say folk art is like way. I mean, on surface, way more valuable, just because it has potential to connect more people, and it's also like a more organic form of tradition than like you know
Mm.
like a bunch of people going to school and like studying a bunch of people who made art before and really thinking like analytically about it. Whereas in folk art, it's just like, yeah, it's just organic and it's like, um,
Mm.
yeah, no one's really running it. No one's really running the show. It's just kind of everyone, you know, uh, in like a community,
Hmm.
which I feel like
But isn't there less intentionality about that? Isn't there less thought baked into it?
with folk art,
Yeah.
I mean, I would say there's a different kind of intentionality and then it's more sincere.
Fair enough. I asked that question a little bit, entirely as a devil's advocate,
Yeah.
I'll say. I do believe there's an incredible value in folk art, and to me, that value lies mostly in the act of creating it and in the environment of creating it. Specifically, that it is a way to engage with your community in a creative way. Not just as like you're the performer and you have an audience, but um, to create, and I'll speak to music because that's my field. To create music and to create see what your peers are creating.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I mean, that's why I enjoy like part of it making art. It's just, like feeling connected to people who are like doing the same thing as me and like for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
And there's a rich history of that going back forever,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't think there's been a culture that we know of ever that hasn't had music.
Yeah. I would imagine that's true.
I heard it somewhere. Must be true.
Yeah. I mean, at least singing. I mean, everyone has singing.
Certainly, yeah.
I'm trying to think. What other things do I keep thinking about that really bug me about this question? I mean, it's like anytime I look at like a really complicated score now, like my first thought is, wow, how many hours did this person put into this? And like, like
But me, that doesn't bother me at all. Unless, well, what would bother me about it is the very real possibility that their intentionality in doing so was misplaced.
mhm,
Which who are we to judge?
right,
As an external entity,
yeah,
but
yeah,
um, it must happen
yeah,
sometimes,
right,
and maybe it happens more than it doesn't.
yeah. No way to, yeah. I mean, be interesting to like. I mean, it'd be BS, but just like go through pieces and judge like this person, like obviously, like it's all.
This person has deep, unaddressed. Uh, yeah.
I mean, part of, I guess another thing I think about a lot, and thinking about like individual psychology of people, like the world has changed so much in like the past 30 years that like I wouldn't put pressure on anyone before like I don't know 1990 1980. Like I wouldn't place any blame on them for not having these thoughts because no one was thinking this way and we didn't have the
Mm.
infrastructure to actually like change the world in as like a focused and like scientific way. That's part of like the we're in a very unusual situation and we should be very careful about how we think about it because the situation is like changed so rapidly and it's unprecedented in
Mm.
human history and like
Yeah.
all that stuff. Yeah, I mean something about that seems kind of illogical, but I don't know. It's hard
Hmm.
for me to counter that argument.
Wait, what seems illogical?
Just that like I'm putting uh people 30 years ago up to a different standard than I am myself today. Like Because
Interesting.
that seems like immediately like there's some inconsistency.
Yeah, because it's always on a gradient, right? Like even 100 years ago, they were experiencing changes that were unprecedented in human history in the same ways that we are now, just to a much lesser extent.
Right. I guess what I'm mostly talking about, like, have you heard of GiveWell?
No.
So there are a bunch of sites like this now, but they're like charity aggregators, and they just rate charities based on how effective they are, um,
Hmm.
and calculating things like how much does it cost to save a life, statistically through stuff like malarial bed nets and intestinal worm treatments and that kind of thing, um, and it's I mean like there's like whole organizations of people dedicated to that, and it's just like it's like right there. It's like easier than it's ever been, right? You just like have the money, go to the go to the site, just hit click, and like that's it. And it's like that's just I mean it's bonkers. Like if you actually think about
Hmm.
what that means, we have this like meme of like the celebrity on TV telling us we can save a child for a stupid small amount of money. And so I feel like people, when they hear stuff like that, they kind of dismiss it because it's this like we're just so conditioned to like just dismiss that.
Yeah, it's cheesy.
Yeah.
It's
And
artificial.
like it's obviously more complicated than that, and
Yeah.
yada yada yada.
So Trevor, we have so damn much art that's been produced in the last few decades, if not even the last 100 years. Um, why don't we just use that for a while? Like there's like what 85% of all music on Spotify has 0 views.
I,
Why don't we just go through all of that?
yeah, that's a good argument.
I bet it would last us a decade or two at least. Like maybe in that time, all the musicians can like get a fucking real job and do something productive to support the community.
I mean, my mind has gone there before, because I mean, like the next 100 years for humanity. I'm half serious. Like the next 100 years for humanity are like this is kind of like the gauntlet, you know.
Sure.
And so if there's any time to ask everyone who can to, drop what they're doing and help us not die.
Hmm.
um,
But here's a thought. What if art is an essential part of our cognitive process that allows us to address and adequately deal with upcoming threats?
I mean, I would say that's definitely like a necessary part of our cognitive process, just because we need art to be happy as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Like if you took the analogy of like maybe art is like breathing, and like, okay, look, we got some stressful stuff coming up, so let's better stop breathing, okay?
yeah.
Because we need to put all our focus into um running or whatever.
Yeah, that's a pretty good that's a pretty good analogy. Although I mean, it's kind of based on that art is essential as breathing.
Yeah, it is, and that is a supposition, but I think there may be something to that. But actually, this is a really interesting question, because we as biological creatures have the natural response to a stressful situation to tense up, stop breathing. When you're really trying to focus on something,
Mm-hmm.
you hold your breath.
Mm-hmm.
And for that to have evolved as a biological trait, there has to be some value to it.
Interesting. How does that connect to art?
Well, like to say that maybe there is a point at which we should stop doing art and focus on what's truly necessary to survive.
Mm-hmm.
just to get through the gauntlet, and we'll pick it up after.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you draw that line? There's so many situations nowadays, especially with this transformed world, where people engage in stressful situations and their natural biological response is to freeze up and stop breathing, which is absolutely contrary to what would be beneficial in that situation.
Yeah. I feel like that's a bit of a stretch because you can...
How?
Well, because you can do the breathing thing. I mean, that's just mindfulness. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with, like, art necessarily.
Maybe I didn't communicate my idea clearly. I'm not sure.
So you're saying, like, you're talking about literally breathing?
I'm talking about so literally breathing as a metaphor for creating art.
Okay.
Okay, so look, I've got a hypothetical. Okay, so I've got this real phenomenon, right? You have a stressful situation. You stop breathing as a natural biological response, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some situations, like fight or flight, like, oh shit, I have to focus and think really, really fast right now, and then I'll be able to breathe in like 5 seconds. That's a really valuable, important reaction, and we wouldn't have that reaction if it weren't so. It would have been weeded out through natural selection, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you have this real phenomena where in certain situations to put the breathing on hold is a valuable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take my metaphor that art is to humanity as breathing is to human,
Yeah.
Maybe there's a point at which we should put art on hold. However, it's challenging to know exactly when that is. And I think there's a lot of times when we can get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
In our society today, we face a lot of stressful situations that do not benefit from our natural response of shutting down. And so we stop breathing and we shut down, and it actually intensifies the stressful situation and may make it worse. So maybe we potentially face that same risk if we were to shut down art for the sake of pursuing more tangible good.
Yeah. You mean that art just like gives you a way to counteract that response? Is that what you're saying, kind of? Or like
no.
No,
That's not what I'm saying.
It's similar to the response of not breathing.
Well, because if you take, and I'll admit that this is just a hypothesis, that art is a necessary part of the cognitive process, that we gain more insight by having art than we would if we were to spend our energy otherwise, and that helps us navigate the world better.
Totally. Yeah.
If you take that, that's kind of like, it's a metaphor for breathing, right? Because breathing, you need it to think straight. If you don't have it, then maybe it's more challenging to think.
Yeah.
And you're gonna not be able to navigate the world for very long.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. It all kind of rests on whether you think it's a good analogy to breathing or not. I could see it. I guess.
Maybe there's a better analogy out there, but I don't know. It makes sense to me.
I mean, it makes sense, but like breathing is such an essential thing. It's like if you choose breathing, it's gonna, obviously that's essential. I mean, I do get the analogy to some kind of like cycle that we need to go through to stay happy and adjusted and sane and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. What about a different analogy? What about, say, serotonin?
Sure.
Art is as serotonin. Art is to serotonin as humanity is to human.
You lost me with that one.
Uh,
I don't know.
well, it's just the same metaphor, except for rather than something that's maybe like obviously essential, it's something that like you maybe could go without, but it would be shitty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's yeah. What does serotonin exactly do? Like, it has something to do with like, it's like more durable well-being than dopamine, right? It's like, but
Interesting. I'm not sure I fully understand serotonin. I'm not sure the experts do either.
yeah,
Um, but maybe a good way to understand it is through experience of its absence. I think maybe if you have had an experience of depression, that maybe you understand what it's like to be without serotonin, and so maybe you understand what serotonin is. For people who have taken certain drugs such as MDMA, and experienced the crash afterward.
mm-hmm.
That crash is defined by an absence of serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and while I can't say that I've experienced it fully, I've definitely nibbled at the edges a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, and it felt to me just sort of a nameless despair, a sense of not well-being of the world, that it's impossible for things to be well,
yeah,
and mixed with a general sense of apathy.
yeah, yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah,
And so, yeah, that would be life without serotonin,
yeah.
maybe.
That's probably a pretty good analogy.
Cool.
Yeah. I guess one thing I think about a lot that we haven't really talked about is just we talked about it a little bit, but like the disconnect between like, if you think about like, if I wasn't to do this job, who else would be doing it, and how different would it be, right? I mean, if you think about like the kind of like AI research stuff that I'm thinking about going into, it's like, well, if someone else is doing that, they'd probably be doing about the same thing that I would be doing.
Yeah.
Right. Although I mean, maybe not. I mean, the kind of stuff I want to do is more like research that would probably be a little bit more like not so like menial tasks and stuff. But yeah, if you think about music, it's like, oh, obviously, no one would be doing what I'm doing exactly. Someone could be doing a pretty similar thing.
Yeah.
And probably is doing a similar thing, a bunch of places, but it's like no one's going to be exactly like that, and it's
Interesting.
yeah,
Value through individuality.
yeah, because that is something like in like effective altruism and stuff. They talk about like, think about if you didn't do this job, who would be doing it, and how big is the difference between those two things. And that's part of
interesting.
Yeah. I did actually I was surprised I hadn't found this page before, but like I mentioned the 80,000 hours thing. There's actually this organization called 80,000 hours. It's like career, helping people find careers, and they have, there is a page for, like a music career, and like I started reading, I was like, wow, they totally misunderstand why anyone would go into this, because like let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I mean they really take like the you think you're going to affect millions of people's lives, and the chance of that is really low, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean the title of the article is literally called "Pursuing Fame in Art and Entertainment." It's like, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, fame.
Yeah.
You want to be well renowned by your peers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean when I think about it, like I could have a totally meaningful life just being a musician, like a local musician in Austin, and like tour sometimes, and if I knew for sure that was like the best thing I could do.
But that's the thing, is you're never going to know for sure because the payoffs are so intangible. They may be huge, but it is a risk. They may not be.
Right, and they take a long time. It takes a long time to know.
Yeah, or you may never know at all.
Right.
How many composers have become widely influential after they died?
Yeah. But I mean, 20th century music, most of 20th century music is way beyond like people suddenly deciding 100 years later that like it's really, really, or like that it's going to have like a wide appeal.
Sure. But then again, you never know. You never know what's going to hit.
That's true.
That's the point of the natural selection, right? You create a lot of varying different organisms, and the ones that are well fitted for the environment survive. Or in the case of art, the one they may become well fitted for a future environment or an environment in a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you really do not know what's going to take off.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's like random mutation.
Exactly.
I mean, well, yeah, sure, you quote unquote don't know, but you can make some educated guesses.
You can, but you might be just as wrong as if you were just to pick one randomly. I mean, again, take blues. Like if you would have spoken to the most educated musician of the time frame in the culture when blues was arising, and you showed them some blues and say, "Hey, is this anything? Is this gonna be a thing?"
Yeah.
They'd say, "Ha, no."
or hip hop. I'm sure.
Yeah. Rap.
Yeah. I think I pretty much agree with that idea. That like that's.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like you could say the same thing about pure mathematics, because that very reliably produces discoveries that have like, wide, impacts and applications, but no one really knows what's out there until they find it. And it could be in some obscure corner, a very specific thing. But then it just comes back to music, like what's the biggest possible impact? And like, it could be like a whole genre. I mean, another like the other place my mind goes is like, experimental electronic music and like the early 20th century and like, mid-century. Like, I'm sure that had, most of the innovations were from, like contemporary music people like making a bunch of weird shit with the synthesizers and it, they only got into pop music in like, the 60s and 70s. I mean, I think that's a good example. Because, you could have shown someone like one of those big synthesizers in like 1940 and like, hey, guess what? In like 60 years, all the music is going to be made on one of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is like, I do legitimately believe that AI is going to redefine our relationship to art within.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah. So there's a question: is when artificial intelligence has automated everything and we're just sucking off the teat of Big Susan. What do you call the artificial intelligence? Big Daddy. Sucking on Big Daddy's teat. What's the purpose of us and art?
I mean, I think when that happens, I mean, that's the kind of society where I think art will be totally essential because we'll have nothing else to do. Like people will literally like, not know what to do with themselves on like a gigantic scale, like literally everyone, because there's, what else is there to do? And I think people will still want to connect to other humans through art. I think people will still be creating things.
What if the artificial intelligence also recognizes the value of art, and so it decides to apply itself to creating art and creates every possible variant that any human could ever come up with?
Actually, yeah. So I mean, that's an exciting idea, and like, I mean, there's going to be AIs that make art no matter what.
Certainly, already happening.
What's that?
Yeah, it's already happening.
Yeah. the idea that gets me excited is like something that's able to analyze our brains to figure out like our preferences on such a granular level that it can like, you know, create like the perfect piece of art for you specifically that no one else has heard. And it's not like some weird MIDI like rendering. It's like literally like, you know, vocals and like, you know, everything. And that it would be able to like elicit very, very strong emotional responses from you.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it's kind of a creepy idea, but like, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be possible at some point.
No, certainly. Certainly. But then what would be the point of creating art if you knew the computer already made that art?
Well, I think for me, what I like about composing is that it's kind of like exploring. And, you know, even if you're traveling to some place, some, you know, region of music, region of possible music that someone else has already seen, that some AI has already created music in, you're still experiencing it for the first time. And there's still the joy of exploration there. And I think people will still be able to find joy in that, even if some AI has created every possible piece of art or music. And this kind of gets back to my I think more amateurs should be making music or art because that's where we're going to end up. I firmly believe.
Certainly. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to think that's like legitimately possible within our lifetimes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, if we get our shit together though.
Yeah.
Should there be art? Maybe.
Do you agree with me?
Yeah, yes, question mark. I think that's a fair summation. Should there be art? Yes.